Good morning, folks. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jimmy Bashar with the ISO Stakeholder Affairs Group, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Energy Storage and Distributed Energy Resources Phase 3 Stakeholder Call to discuss the draft tariff language for this initiative. At this time, I'd like to introduce my colleagues in the room with me here today, beginning to my left.
This is Bill Weaver from Legal.
Eric Kim with Infrastructure Regulatory Policy.
Isabella Nicosia, Stakeholder Affairs.
John Gooden, Infrastructure and Regulatory Policy.
Elaine Siegel, Market Services.
Peter Clower, Information Technology, Smart Grid.
PSL Market Services.
Thanks, folks. Our agenda for today is to, of course, discuss the draft tariff language that you currently see displayed. And as you may know, our calls and webinars are recorded for stakeholder convenience, allowing those who are unable to attend to listen to the recordings after the meetings. The recordings will be publicly available on the ISO webpage for a limited time following the meetings. Of course, the recordings and any related transcriptions should not be reprinted without ISO's permission. And lastly, of course, if you have a question, please press #2 to virtually raise your hand in the queue, and we'll be sure to call on folks in the order that hands were raised. We, of course, please ask that you state the name and the company that you represent. And also, as a reminder, folks, please press #2 once. If you push it again as you're in the queue, it will remove you from the queue, so we just don't want to have any confusion on that. So with that, I'll hand it over to Bill.
Good morning, everyone. This is Bill Weaver. I'm the lawyer for the Energy Storage and Distributed Energy Resources team, and as such, I put together the tariff revisions for this, and we'll be drafting the transmittal letter and the filing we'll submit to FERC. The current 2019 technology implementation is scheduled for November 20th of this year, and so it is likely we would target a filing date, between 60 and 120 days in advance of that. I think if I had to guess now, I would say it would be on or around August 20th is when we would file ESDR 3 to put it before FERC for November 20th implementation. Let's see, we received 2 sets of comments on these tariff revisions, one from eMotorworks, one from Southern California Edison. I thank both parties for submitting comments. They're both very short, and so as a result, we'll just spend our time this morning going over all of the tariff revisions, but it should be pretty quickly, I don't think, based on the comments and what we're implementing this year. There shouldn't be much in the way of surprise or contention. eMotorworks submitted a comment essentially saying that the CAISO could be more transparent and do a better job of stakeholdering what goes into each technology implementation, specifically criticizing the fact that through this tariff revision process they've seen that the portion of ESDR 3 to provide EVSEs, essentially charging stations with the ability to have separate demand response methodologies from any host entity will not be part of this year's implementation, and obviously eMotorworks expressed its quite reasonable frustration that that had been dropped. Ultimately, we don't have much to say here. I think we are at the mercy of the people who put together the programming and our outside vendors who do that. But we would encourage anyone to continue to lobby on any policy's behalf for that to be implemented. We assure you that we do the same. We would love ESDR 3 to be all of ESDR 3 just as much as everyone else would. We don't enjoy, sticking these things in a drawer. And we did pass that message, pass eMotorworks letter up to our upper management so that could be visible within the ISO. The other set of comments we had was from Edison, and I'll address those once we get to that section. Speaking generally, what we have in ESDR 3 now for this filing and this implementation are essentially 2 sets of revisions. One is to allow proxy demand resources to have real-time, hourly, and 15-minute bidding options, as opposed to just the 5-minute real-time options they have now. This essentially gives PDRs the existing bidding options that intertie resources have, or non-dynamic system resources. The other broad category is also with demand response. We are revising the application of the net benefits test, removing the single load serving entity requirement for a proxy demand resource, and not in any policy or technology, but in these tariff revisions, you see that we took the time to clarify some of the existing bidding rules for demand response resources, but there's no change there in policy. It's just we wanted to clean up these sections to be more clear. And therefore, the two items that were approved by the board in ESDR 3 but have been delayed to future implementations are the EVSE portion and the load shift product. I'm going to pause here to see if anyone has any questions, and after that we'll start going through the tariff revisions themselves.
We do have a question. Caller, please go ahead.
Hi, this is Chanyu Lo from PG&E. Just a comment. You mentioned the ESDR's implementation day is November 20th. It's a little different than what we heard from the PMO, CAISO PMO. It's November 13th.
Okay, well, from your lips, we'll take it.
Thank you.
It could be. I'm not sure.
I think whatever comes out in the release user group, the RUG, or the technical user group meetings, those would be the most current dates, and we'll make sure that the tariff language is tracking that as well.
Thank you.
And that really wouldn't change our filing date with FERC. So, and the filing date will have a date certain for implementation. Thank you. Okay, well, not hearing any other comments, we will start going through the tariff revisions. I hope everyone can see the screen. We are screen sharing. Can you hear me this? I'm going to try to not go through these quickly. I know if people can be nauseated by going quickly through the screen sharing or just not see anything at all, but please pause me. Please jump in at any point if you have a question about anything or don't know what's going on. So the first set of revisions are the changes to definitions, and they go in Appendix A in any new terms. And this is really cleanup is what you're seeing here. In reviewing what we had existing for system resources, or the intertie resources, it occurred to us that we use hourly block schedule and economic hourly block bids a lot throughout Section 30 and Section 31 of the tariff, but those terms are undefined. And so putting that back in, and just so hopefully that's more helpful for both the intertie resources who use them and the proxy demand resources who will be able to use these options. So that was our intent there. Moving along, so Section 4 of the tariff, you should see no policy change here and certainly no technology change. This is where I was talking about we're cleaning up the tariff language bidding rules for PDRs. Some of the bidding rules were in Section 4 where they should not be, because this is really just about your scheduling coordinator and the type of resource you are and not about bidding. And some of the provisions were in Section 30, and so our intent here is just to reference Section 30 and move PDR and RDR bidding rules to the appropriate section. Moving down, you'll see here, now this is a policy and technology change. We have removed the single LSE requirement. The single UDC requirement remains consistent with our policy. And that's it. That was a fairly easy policy to implement through the tariff. These changes here were just nits. Okay, here you see again, this is for the hourly and 15-minute bidding. We're essentially putting in the demand response providers will elect in the master file how they want to bid and be dispatched in real time. And they have all three options, and if they don't submit an election, it will default to the standard 5-minute real-time market. So this section was no longer necessary. This is 11.5.2.4. Essentially, as I'm sure everyone knows, we used to apply the net benefits test after the fact to all bids and awards and schedules. And if you were below the net benefits test, your settlement would be adjusted as if you had bid essentially above the test. And that would result in uninstructed imbalance energy throughout the UDC where that happened. And so this was the cleanup section there. So we don't need that anymore because this won't happen anymore. And so this is coming out. Is there a, I saw like a comment flash on the screen.
Saw that.
We will, someone has flashed a comment. We'll get to it when we see it. Oh, okay, but I'm guessing it means someone has something. Let's see. Okay, so now, I apologize here, like, you know, it's part of the existing tariff that this jumps around between hourly block bidding and the single LSE and net benefits test requirements. But here, this is just the provision where how we're going to settle PDRs if they submit hourly block bids, and it's essentially exactly how it all works for intertie resources, being that they will constitute 4 FMM schedules and will not be eligible for bid cost recovery, and these very in-the-weeds charge codes will also not apply, as they don't apply today to intertie resources. Moving on, these are just some number changes. Let's see. Okay, and so here, as I said, here's where we tried to, I'll point you to here first. This is, again, we saw language in Section 4 that had some of the bidding rules for PDRs, and then they're not perfectly clearly written, and we had them here in the struck language, and what we wanted to do instead was just have a neat list of here are the exact types of bids we'll take from PDRs. And that is what we have. This is not intended to result in any policy change or whatnot, but just be more clear and more transparent about what the existing rules are.
Yep. So thanks, Bill. Yeah, we had a question. I guess they missed when the PDR LSR language will be developed. What are the dates? Well, I guess we said we'd file in August 2020. Is that correct?
No, I'm sorry. No, we would file in August of, I was talking about this year's filing, so we'll file in August for the 2019 implementation, and we will develop the tariff language for EVSE and the load shift product essentially when we have more clarity on their implementation. Right now, my understanding is that they are scheduled in the 2020 implementation, and so you would likely start seeing draft tariff language in 2020. You know, assuming it's a fall implementation, we would file 2 to 4 months before that. You'd see tariff language developed, you know, several months before that. or a couple months before that at the latest. And so, I really don't want to give a better answer than 2020. But good question, thank you. Okay, moving down, this is not a clarification, this is a new policy for bidding in the real-time market, but it is simply the application of existing policy as it works for intertie resources. Again, it's just sort of repeating that PDRs can submit economic hourly block bids to be considered in HASP and as binding schedules in the 4 FMM intervals. Same thing, we're clarifying here that it's economic bids that we will accept from RDRRs. This is sort of a nuance of the tariff. I think everyone, when we say bid, people usually mean bid and not self-schedule, but Appendix A to the tariff does say that a self-schedule is included in a bid, and so in terms of the tariff, it's a little more clear and more transparent to put economic in front of things just to mean that we do not mean self-schedule in these cases. So that was what we were trying to do there, just to clarify the existing rule. Okay, now back to net benefits test. As I said before, the net benefits test worked as an after-the-fact settlement adjustment. As we discussed in ESER 3, we want to move this to a before-the-fact bid, well, not cap, but a market clearing price, where the bid has to exceed to even be accepted by the CAISO markets. This was the one section where Edison submitted comments. Edison had 2 notes. First, it was to strike this highlighted text here, which should be struck. Like, that's neither existing language nor proposed language, simply a ghost in the machine. Sorry, that will be deleted. I really don't know where it came from. Anyways, the other thing Edison submitted was that we should say the CAISO will not accept PDR or RDRR bids for energy, and they said, and commitment costs below this threshold market clearing price in the CAISO markets. So I definitely understand what Edison is getting at. I just want to make a couple responses. I would say first, commitment cost isn't a tariff term. It's neither defined in Appendix A nor used in the tariff. But I understand that what you're getting at is, scheduling coordinators can submit a 3-part bid for their bid for energy, including their startup and minimum load costs. And I think there are 2 ways to go about this, is that that I think would be more clear than putting and commitment costs, is one, we could list and startup and minimum load costs. I don't think that's really necessary in the tariff because, the market, the net benefits test only applies for energy. And so if we're not accepting the bid, well, we're not, and it's a 3-part bid, we're not accepting the bid for anything. So any startup and minimum load submissions would also be rejected, even if we just left it as the tariff language. So it could be that we put this more in the business practice manual just for clarity's sake, saying also if you submit these other things, they're going to be rejected as well because your entire bid was rejected. But the other option is that we could just strike for energy, and it would just say, the CAISO will not accept PDR or RDRR bids below this threshold market clearing price in the CAISO markets. So you'll likely see one of those 2 outcomes. Either it'll still say for energy, but we'll make your requested clarification in the business practice manual because that is how it'll work. Or we'll strike for energy, and I guess we would still kind of make that clarification in the business practice manual. But ultimately, we agree with your point. It's just not necessary to specify it that way, and if anything, kind of could be confusing. Okay, but we received this comment yesterday, so we haven't had time to kind of develop this is what we're definitely going to do. I would say if Edison or anyone has further questions on this, or anything for that matter, feel free to reach out to me. Let me just make that point. I should have said that at the top, but based on the level of comments we got for this set, we don't anticipate reposting any language or holding another call. It'll essentially be, very close to this. If we make substantial changes, then we would repost. But ultimately, it'll be something very close to this that we file. That said, if anyone wants to submit late comments or just discuss this with me, they should feel free to reach out anytime up to filing. Stakeholder revisions are not like policy in the sense that we can tinker with these right up until the date we file without, reposting, going to the board, or anything like that. Okay. So someone?
Yep, thanks, Bill. I think we have a question in the queue.
Hi. Hi, this is Noor from Olivine. I just have I don't know if this is what Edison was getting at, but suppose you have a minimum load cost that leads to your total bid cost being below the NBT. Would you stop that?
Yeah, ultimately, if their price for the megawatt hour of energy is below the market clearing price, the bid would be rejected.
Right, but that would be different than the language now, because that's not technically a bid for energy. Like if the P-min is 1 megawatt, that means that you'd reject a minimum load cost that's below the NVT price, right? Or you should.
NBT is just energy. Just
yeah.
energy bid. Should be.
Just then. That means I don't know anyone would do it, but technically somebody could submit a minimum load cost that led to their total bid cost being less than the NBT.
Yes, it's really, or this is John Gooden, it's really just that energy component, because that's what we're comparing our energy prices from the prior year under the NBT methodology. And so you're looking at not some of those embedded startup min load type of costs, but you're looking at its impact in the energy market. And so it's focused exclusively on that energy bid component.
I see that. I'm just saying that you can pretty much structure a bid in a way that could be below that price then.
Again, it'll be rejected through a sole evaluation of the energy.
All right. Well, see if there's any questions here. Feel free to reach out. Okay. Moving on. This is simply language that's no longer necessary, or I guess, that's essentially redundant with what we had before, so it's removed. Let's see. Here we're just adding, right, this is just saying what we settle, and before it said hourly intertie schedules, we're also adding that it's hourly block schedules from PDRs, and that is it. So I'll pause here if anyone has any final questions, but essentially that is the set of tariff revisions. And again, anyone can feel free to reach out to me individually if they have other comments or suggestions between now and August.
So I'm not seeing anything in the queue, operator. We'll give folks a couple more seconds. I'm seeing as we approach the closed session.
Please press pound 2. We don't have any questions.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Bill. As a reminder, look for the recording of this call to be posted within the next couple of business days. Thanks so much.
That concludes our conference. Thank you for using AT&T Event Conferencing Enhanced. You may now disconnect.